The Arrival. Recording Archive, GDA, 47B, P1. Senior Training Director Professor Zalax. Classification, Historical Documentation. The day the humans arrived at Centaur Prime marked what many would later call the beginning of the Third Galactic Renaissance. Of course, none of us knew that at the time. All we saw were three impossibly fragile beings stepping onto our landing platform, apparently unbothered by the crushing 2.3 standard gravity that had sent countless other species to their medical facilities within minutes of arrival. I, Professor Zalax, had spent the previous 3 cycles preparing my formal protest against their admission. The document contained 2,847 pages of meticulously researched reasons why accepting human cadets into the Galactic Defense Academy would destroy our institution's reputation. I had cited everything from their primitive technological development to their complete lack of psychic abilities. The council had responded with a single line: integration is non-negotiable. Looking back, I'm grateful they ignored me. Mason Drake led the group down the transport ramp, his red hair catching our binary sun's light like living flame. Behind him, Nova Chen moved with the practiced grace of what humans call a dancer, though how she maintained such fluid motion under our gravity still puzzles our physicists. Rex Thompson brought up the rear, wearing what I would come to recognize as his trademark grin, the one that made my secondary nervous system twitch with anticipation of impending chaos. "Welcome to Centaur Prime," I announced, my bioluminescent spots carefully regulated to display proper diplomatic courtesy. "I am Senior Training Director Zalax. You have been granted the unprecedented honor of..." Question. Thompson interrupted, raising his hand like an eager hatchling. "The artificial gravity on the transport was set to your standard, right? About 2.3 times Earth normal." I flicked my facial membranes in annoyance. "Correct, Cadet Thompson. As stated in the orientation materials." "Cool, cool," he continued, bouncing slightly on his toes. "So this is actually easier than the trip here. The transport's artificial gravity was way more inconsistent. Nova, we should totally try that zero-G combat training thing they mentioned in the brochure first." Chen's dark eyes sparkled with interest, while Drake merely shook his head with what I would learn was fond exasperation. I felt my spots involuntarily shift to a deeper shade of indigo, a clear sign of stress that I hoped these humans couldn't interpret. "Cadet Thompson," I said, drawing myself up to my full height, "the zero-gravity combat training is part of Year 7's advanced curriculum. You will begin, as all students do, with theoretical quantum physics and..." "About that," Drake interjected, his voice carrying the kind of authority that made even senior faculty members pause. "We've reviewed your curriculum structure, and we have a proposal." The audacity. 300 years of teaching experience had not prepared me for humans who wanted to reorganize our carefully crafted program before even entering the building. I was about to deliver a scathing reminder of their position when Chen spoke for the first time. "Your current system is based on linear progression," she said, her voice carrying the same quiet intensity I'd noticed in her gaze. "Theory, then application, then practical experience. But humans learn differently. We learn by doing, by failing, by adapting. We'd like to try a more integrated approach." I remember thinking their translator must be malfunctioning. The current curriculum has produced the finest officers in the galaxy for over 1,000 years. Commander Bright Spire holds the record for fastest completion at 7 years, 3 months, and "We'll beat it," all three said in unison, with such matter-of-fact confidence that several of my colleagues actually took a step backward. That was the moment I should have realized what we were dealing with. Not arrogance, as I first assumed, but something far more dangerous: human determination. The next day, against every protocol and precedent, they began what they called their speed run of our program. We allowed it partly out of curiosity and partly because we assumed failure would teach them the proper respect for our methods. After all, the theoretical quantum physics alone required understanding 15 dimensions simultaneously, something that had taken me decades to master. Thompson approached it like what he called a video game, creating elaborate physical models using holographic projectors and hand gestures that made absolutely no sense to our mathematics department but somehow worked. Chen developed a meditation technique that let her perceive quantum states through dance movements, literally choreographing quantum equations. Drake simply sat in the library for 3 days straight, emerging with a new mathematical framework that made our senior theorists weep with joy. They completed the first year's theoretical curriculum in 2 weeks. But it was their approach to psychic resistance training that truly showed us how unprepared we were for humans. Most species require careful preparation and years of gradual exposure to develop mental shields against psychic influence. When informed of this, Thompson had laughed. "Oh man, you mean we get to be actual Jedi? This is gonna be awesome." I had to look up what a Jedi was in their cultural database. The reference did not fill me with confidence. The standard procedure was to begin with simple emotional projections, helping students build mental walls over months of practice. Drake, Chen, and Thompson walked straight into the advanced training chamber and asked for the strongest psychic attack we could generate. "Are you certain?" I asked, my spots pulsing with genuine concern. The mental feedback could cause permanent damage to an unprepared mind. "Trust us," Drake said with that same quiet confidence. "We've got a theory about this too." What happened next would rewrite our understanding of psychic defense. When our strongest telepaths launched their attack, the humans didn't defend at all, at least not in any way we recognized. Instead, they opened their minds completely, flooding the telepathic link with the full chaos of human consciousness. 3 of our most experienced instructors had to be carried to the medical bay, overwhelmed by what they later described as trying to drink an ocean of pure chaos through a straw. The humans called it the fire hose technique. "See," Thompson explained cheerfully to his stunned audience, "you guys approach psychic defense like building a wall. But walls can be broken. We figured, why not try the opposite? Open the floodgates and let them deal with everything at once. No one's gonna try to read our minds twice." He was right. The technique was officially added to the curriculum the next day, though no other species has yet managed to replicate it successfully. By the end of their first month at the academy, the humans had forced us to reevaluate everything we thought we knew about learning, adaptation, and the nature of intelligence itself. But their true test, and the moment that would change galactic history forever, came when we received word that the swarm had breached the outer defense perimeter. The same swarm that had destroyed 3 civilizations before we managed to contain them. The same swarm that our most advanced tactical computers couldn't predict or counter. The same swarm that was now headed straight for our supposedly impregnable training facility. And somehow, Thompson was still grinning. The swarm approaches. Recording Archive, GDA 47B, P2. Senior Training Director Professor Zalax. Classification, Historical Documentation, Priority Update. The swarm's approach to Centaur Prime triggered every emergency protocol in the Academy's 1,000-year history. As our defense systems activated and evacuation orders echoed through the halls, I found myself in the unprecedented position of watching 3 human cadets argue with our tactical AI. "With all due respect, Strategos," Mason Drake was saying to our most advanced military computer, "your projected defense patterns assume the swarm operates on logic." The AI's holographic interface flickered with what I could have sworn was irritation. "The swarm has destroyed 3 civilizations using documented tactical procedures. My calculations are based on—" "Yeah, that's the problem," Rex Thompson interrupted, sprawled casually in a chair meant for a species with 3 spinal columns. "You're looking for patterns in chaos. Nova, show them the thing." Nova Chen had already commandeered the main holographic display, her fingers dancing through the interface with impossible speed. "The swarm doesn't use tactics," she explained, pulling up footage from previous attacks. "They use something far more primitive and far more dangerous, they use instinct." I remember my spots pulsing with a mixture of horror and fascination as she manipulated the display, highlighting movement patterns I'd never noticed before. But their attacks have always followed predictable. No, Drake cut in, his voice carrying that steel-edged authority that still made my secondary nervous system twitch. They haven't. We've been forcing their actions into our patterns because we couldn't comprehend the alternative. The swarm doesn't think like us, Professor. They think like Earth's insects. Thompson sat up, his ever-present grin now carrying an edge of predatory anticipation. And lucky for everyone, Earth's got some nasty bugs. Nova, show them the bullet ant footage. What followed was a crash course in Earth's most aggressive insect species, delivered with an enthusiasm that disturbed several faculty members to the point of leaving the room. The humans explained how various Earth species had evolved similar patterns to the swarm's behavior, from army ants raiding formations to termite colony structures. But this knowledge alone doesn't help us, I pointed out, trying to maintain some semblance of academic propriety. The swarm's technological capabilities far exceed. Actually, Chen interrupted, bringing up a new simulation, it helps us predict exactly what they're going to do next. Because if they're operating on insect logic, they're about to make a massive mistake. Drake nodded, taking over the tactical display. Insects on Earth evolved alongside predators. They developed defense mechanisms, attack patterns, and survival strategies. But you know what they never had to deal with? Video games, Thompson supplied with that insufferable grin. I fail to see how your primitive entertainment systems. Games taught us to think both like the predator and the prey, Chen explained, her dark eyes intense with concentration as she refined the simulation. To understand both sides of the hunt. The swarm acts on pure instinct, but we've spent generations learning how to counter those exact patterns. Not for survival, but for fun. What they proposed next was so outrageous that I actually checked the translation matrix 3 times to ensure there wasn't a malfunction. They wanted to use the Academy's advanced combat simulators to recreate what they called a tower defense game on a planetary scale. The swarm attacks in waves, Drake explained, pulling up their proposed defense grid. Just like every zombie game ever made. They'll follow the path of least resistance while trying to overwhelm us with numbers. So we don't try to outthink them, we use their instincts against them. Like playing StarCraft against a Zergling rush, Thompson added, then waved off our confused expressions. Never mind, Earth reference. Point is, we know exactly how to handle this because we've been practicing for it since we were kids. The next 6 hours were a blur of activity as the humans restructured our entire defensive network based on principles from their entertainment systems. They created killing zones they called aggro ranges, established resource choke points based on something called spawning mechanics, and completely rewrote our targeting algorithms to account for what they termed AI pathing exploitation. The most disturbing part. Strategos, our most advanced military AI, began learning their terminology and incorporating their suggestions with an enthusiasm that bordered on inappropriate for a tactical computer. This is exactly like kiting world bosses in MMOs, Thompson explained to the increasingly bewildered AI. You establish your tank and spank positions here, set up your DPS zones there, and basically turn the whole thing into a giant raid encounter. I understand approximately 12% of those terms, Strategos admitted, but the tactical applications are fascinating. The first wave of the swarm arrived exactly where Chen had predicted, following the exact pattern she'd mapped out based on army ant behavior. Our modified defense grid cut through them with an efficiency that left the observation deck silent in shock. Boom! Thompson shouted, punching the air. That's what we call ad management. Nova, watch your aggro on the next pull. Chen's fingers danced across the tactical controls, adjusting our defensive screens with the same grace she brought to her quantum physics demonstrations. Already on it. Mason, we've got patrol ads incoming from Vector 7. Drake's voice remained calm as he coordinated with Strategos. Executing crowd control patterns now. Professor Zalax, you might want to record this next part. It's about to get interesting. What happened next would redefine galactic military doctrine forever. The humans didn't just repel the swarm, they turned the entire engagement into what they called a game tutorial. Each wave was met with increasingly complex defensive patterns, hurting the swarm exactly where our weapons could do the most damage. But it was their analysis of the aftermath that truly demonstrated why humans would become both the most feared and most valued species in the galaxy. See these movement patterns? Chen highlighted several sections of the battle replay. The swarm is learning, but not like we do. They're developing resistance like bacteria, adapting through pure evolutionary pressure. Which means we can predict their adaptations, Drake finished. Every new pattern they develop will follow the same principles we've seen in Earth's evolutionary arms races. Professor, how long has the galaxy been fighting the swarm? 17 standard years, I replied, my spot still pulsing with the aftermath of battle anxiety. Thompson's grin somehow got wider. Want to know how we can end it in less than one? That was the moment I finally understood why the Council had insisted on human integration into the Academy. It wasn't about inclusion or political correctness. It was because somewhere, somehow, someone had realized that humans were the only species in the galaxy crazy enough to look at an unstoppable alien swarm and think, hey, this reminds me of a game I used to play. But even that realization didn't prepare us for what happened next, when Nova Chen suggested we spawn camp the next wave. The resulting strategic discussion between 3 human cadets and our most advanced military AI would later be classified as too dangerous for general distribution by the Galactic Council. They were probably right. Some things, like humans explaining the concept of cheese strats to an artificial intelligence, are too terrifying for most species to contemplate. Evolution of Doctrine. Recording Archive, GDA, 47B, P3. Senior Training Director Professor Zalax. Classification, historical documentation, high clearance required. The successful defense of Centaur Prime should have been cause for celebration. Instead, it triggered what humans would call a bureaucratic meltdown across the Galactic Council. I found myself summoned to an emergency session, attempting to explain how 3 junior cadets had just revolutionized military doctrine that had stood for millennia. The Council chamber's neural dampeners struggled to contain the psychic discharge of 47 species all trying to express their outrage simultaneously. High Counselor Vexthor, their crystalline form vibrating with barely contained energy, finally managed to establish order. Professor Zalax, they chimed, harmonics indicating severe distress, you mean to tell us that these humans defeated the swarm using principles derived from entertainment? Before I could respond, the chamber doors burst open. Rex Thompson strode in, followed by Nova Chen and Mason Drake, all 3 still wearing their combat simulator interfaces. Actually, Thompson announced, completely ignoring every protocol about addressing the Council, we've got something even better to show you. Strategos, you want to take this one? The chamber's holographic displays activated, causing several counselors to shift into their defensive forms. Our tactical AI's avatar materialized, sporting what appeared to be a new visual design inspired by what Thompson called raid boss aesthetics. Honored counselors, Strategos began, its voice carrying new undertones of what I could only describe as enthusiasm. I have completed my analysis of human tactical databases, specifically their gaming archives. My conclusion, we have been approaching the swarm threat incorrectly since its first appearance. Chen stepped forward, her movements drawing every eye in the chamber. The swarm isn't just following insect behavior patterns, she explained, manipulating the holographic display with practiced ease. They're following Earth's evolutionary history. Every adaptation, every tactical shift, we've seen it all before in our planet's fossil record. Impossible, declared Counselor Marenti of the Silicon Collective. Your species has existed for a mere fraction of galactic history. How could you possibly? Because Earth is what you'd call a death world, Drake interrupted, his voice cutting through the chamber like a plasma blade. Life on our planet has been trying to kill itself in increasingly creative ways for billions of years. The swarm's patterns. We call that Tuesday. Thompson picked up the thread, his trademark grin somehow more unsettling in the formal setting. And the best part? We've turned dealing with exactly these kinds of threats into entertainment. Every strategy the swarm has used. There's probably a speedrun video showing how to counter it. The silence that followed was broken only by the soft hum of Strategos' processors as it projected a new simulation. The display showed Earth's evolutionary timeline, highlighting parallel developments between ancient Earth species and swarm adaptations. Observe, Strategos continued, displaying side-by-side comparisons. The swarm's blade forms mirror the development of Earth's mantis shrimp. Their acid projectors follow the same principles as bombardier beetles. Their hive coordination. Identical to Argentine ant supercolonies. Chen's fingers danced through the display, expanding certain sections. But here's the real kicker, they're predictable. Every adaptation follows the same rules that governed evolution on Earth. Which means we know their entire playbook, Thompson finished. Every possible adaptation, every potential evolution, Earth's already seen it and figured out how to beat it. Usually multiple times. The council chamber erupted into chaos again, dozens of species trying to process the implications. High Counselor Vexthor's crystalline form vibrated at frequencies that threatened to shatter the chamber's windows. And you believe, they chimed carefully, that this knowledge can be taught? Drake's smile reminded me uncomfortably of Thompson's usual expression. Better than that. We can make it fun. What followed was perhaps the most surreal presentation in council history. 3 human cadets, aided by an increasingly enthusiastic military AI, proceeded to explain how they planned to transform the Galactic Defense Academy's entire curriculum using principles from what they called game design. Think about it, Thompson explained, practically bouncing with excitement. Your current system is all grind, no reward. But if we implement proper progression systems, achievement unlocks, skill trees. Experience points, Chen added. Competitive leaderboards. Guild systems for cross-species coordination. Team raids against simulated swarm encounters, Drake continued. Progressive difficulty scaling. Dynamic challenge adjustments. Strategos displayed a new interface design that made several counselors recoil in shock. I have already begun implementing these principles into the Academy's training protocols. Initial results show a 300% increase in student engagement and a 500% improvement in combat readiness scores. You can't be serious, Counselor Maranti buzzed in disbelief. You want to turn our most prestigious military institution into a game? With all due respect, Counselor, Chen replied, her quiet intensity filling the chamber, games are how humanity prepared itself for exactly this kind of challenge. We spent generations simulating every possible threat, not because we had to, but because we wanted to. It's called the game layer, Drake explained, bringing up new diagrams. You take real challenges, real skills, real threats, and you make mastering them rewarding. Not just necessary, but engaging. Addictive, even. Thompson's grin reached new levels of concerning. And the best part? We've got centuries of research on how to make it work. Skinner boxes, reinforcement schedules, flow states, everything you need to turn galaxy saving into the most engaging game ever made. I watched as the council tried to process this information, their various appendages and sensory organs expressing emotions that ranged from horror to fascination. But it was Strategos who delivered the killing blow to their resistance. Honored counselors, the AI announced, I have just completed a preliminary simulation of full implementation. Projected results indicate a 97.8% probability of complete swarm eradication within 1 standard year. Additionally, I have discovered something called achievement hunting, which I find most compelling. The silence that followed was broken by High Counselor Vexthor's crystalline laugh, a sound not heard in the chamber for over 3 centuries. Professor Zalax, they chimed, their harmonics carrying unmistakable amusement. It seems your initial protests about accepting human cadets were correct, but not for the reasons you imagined. They haven't destroyed our traditions, they've made them obsolete. As I watched Thompson high-five Chen, a human victory gesture that several counselors attempted to replicate, with varying degrees of anatomical success, I realized we had passed a point of no return. The galaxy was about to learn what happened, and you combined humanity's endless capacity for turning anything into entertainment with the most advanced military training program in known space. The swarm didn't stand a chance. None of us did. The game changes everything. Recording Archive, GDA, 47B, P4. Senior Training Director Professor Zalax. Classification, Historical Documentation, Restricted Access. 6 months after what became known as the Great Gaming Revolution, I found myself standing in what used to be the Academy's main tactical training chamber. The room, once a model of austere military discipline, now pulsed with holographic displays that would have given my younger self an anxiety collapse. Achievement unlocked, First Blood, the chamber's AI announced as a young crystalline cadet successfully executed a perfect swarm countering maneuver. Triple kill bonus. Experience multiplier activated. Nice work, Sparkles. Rex Thompson called from his new position as Raid Leader Instructor, a title he had invented and somehow gotten officially approved. That's definitely going in the highlight reel. The crystalline cadets' facets glowed with pride, an emotion their species had traditionally considered a sign of dangerous instability. But that was before Nova Chen had introduced the concept of positive reinforcement to our teaching methods. Professor, Strategos' voice carried an undertone of what I'd learned to recognize as excitement. You'll want to see the latest data from the Outer Rim campaign. The holographic display shifted to show tactical overlays of the most recent encounters with the swarm. The results were impossible. Or they would have been, before humans taught us how to break reality's rules. Are they actually spawn camping the swarm's emergence points? I asked, my spots flickering between disbelief and admiration. Better, Mason Drake replied, entering the chamber with a stack of what he called patch notes, continuous improvements to our training protocols. They're farming them for experience points. The Hexapod battle group from Sector 7 found out you get bonus points for style, and now they're turning swarm extermination into an art form. The display showed footage of a hexapod warship executing what Thompson had termed a 360 no-scope maneuver against a swarm hive ship. The precision was breathtaking, the efficiency unprecedented, and the victory dance afterward would have been considered a declaration of war under old protocols. The real breakthrough, Chen added, joining us with her own data pad, came when the Silicon Collective decided to try speedrunning. I had learned to dread that term. Speedrunning had already resulted in 3 fundamental laws of physics being reclassified as more like guidelines, really, and had forced us to establish new regulations about exploiting quantum mechanics for what Thompson called sick tricks. Watch this, she said, bringing up new footage. The Silicon Collective found out that if you approach a swarm hive mind at exactly the right angle, while rotating through 11 dimensions. The footage showed a silicon ship performing what appeared to be a violation of several universal constants. The resulting explosion created what our scientists were still arguing might be a new form of matter. They call it the hive mind skip, Thompson explained, grinning. Cuts like 3 hours off the average clear time for a hive assault. The speedrunning community is going crazy trying to optimize it. The speedrunning community? I asked, dreading the answer. Oh yeah, Drake said, pulling up what he called a leaderboard. Turns out once you gamify galactic warfare, everyone wants to be the best. We've got entire species competing for world-first achievements. The Luminari actually requested to delay their species' transcendence to consciousness upload because they're too close to beating the Silicon Collective's record. It was true. The Luminari, a species that had spent 10,000 years preparing to ascend beyond physical form, had put their plans on hold because they were, in Thompson's words, totally addicted to the grind. But the changes went far beyond military applications. The game layer, as humans called it, had begun to infect every aspect of galactic society. The diplomatic corps had implemented a reputation system with faction rewards. The Science Council had turned research into a massive multiplayer crafting system complete with rare drops and legendary discoveries. Even the Economic Consortium had restructured itself around what Thompson called in-game economy principles, leading to the most stable financial period in galactic history. "Professor," Strategos interrupted my reflection, "you should see this. The Arachnid Confederation just submitted a new speedrun category, all achievements, no quantum glitches." "That's impossible," Chen said, immediately interested. "You can't get the Reality Bender achievement without at least 3 quantum exploits." "Actually," Thompson grinned, pulling up new data, "they found this crazy new tech using gravitational slingshots and something they're calling bug physics, no pun intended." "Bug physics?" I asked, immediately regretting the question. "Yeah, turns out if you hit certain gravitational fields at exactly the right angle, while carrying exactly the right mass, while playing exactly the right frequency of classical music." I stopped listening at that point, my attention drawn to a new alert from the Council. The Swarm, it seemed, had developed a new adaptation. Under the old system, this would have triggered emergency protocols and galaxy-wide alerts. Instead, I watched as the notification was automatically converted into a new event announcement: "New raid boss detected. Global event, Evolution Counterstrike begins in 3, 2, 1. The response was immediate. Across the galaxy, ships of every species changed course, heading toward the encounter. Not out of duty or necessity, but because, as Thompson had predicted, they actually wanted to. "Check it out," Drake said, monitoring the response. "The Silicon Collective is already theory-crafting counter-strategies. The Luminari have 3 raid groups assembling. Even the Crystalline Consciousness is sending in their top-ranked PV squad." "The what squad?" I asked. "Player versus environment," Chen explained. "Though technically, since the Swarm is a responsive enemy, it's more like PvP, player versus player. The terminology gets a bit fuzzy when you're dealing with hive-mind bioweapons." As I watched the galaxy's most advanced civilizations coordinate their response using terms like DPS checks and aggro management, I realized something fundamental had changed. The Swarm, once the greatest threat to galactic civilization, had become just another boss fight in an impossibly large game. But the most terrifying part? Everyone was having fun. "Oh snap!" Thompson suddenly exclaimed, pointing at a new notification. "The Arachnids just found a way to clip through spacetime. That's definitely getting patched in the next update. Should we be concerned about that?" I asked. "Nah," Drake replied, already making notes. "We'll just add an achievement for doing it. Call it something like Reality's more like guidelines anyway, and make it worth double points. The community will figure out all the optimal strategies by tomorrow. And categorize them," Chen added. "And rank them. And probably make tutorial videos." I watched as a crystalline battle group executed what they called a perfect rotation against the new Swarm forms, their victory celebration including both traditional crystal harmonics and what appeared to be an earth dance move called the floss. The galaxy had changed, and there was no going back. But as I observed my students, of all species, enjoying what should have been a terrifying battle for survival, I couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, humans had been right all along. Sometimes the best way to face the darkness isn't with grim determination, but with a grin and a scoring system. Game over, New Game Plus. Recording Archive, GDA, 47B, P5. Senior Training Director Professor Zalax. Classification, Historical Documentation, Final Entry. 1 standard year after the introduction of humanity's game layer to galactic civilization, I found myself preparing what would be my final report to the council. The chamber, once a model of rigid formality, now featured holographic achievement trackers, species leaderboards, and what Thompson insisted on calling a kill count display. Final boss time, Rex Thompson announced as we entered, still wearing that same grin that had once made my secondary nervous system twitch. Now it felt almost reassuring. The last known swarm hive mind had been cornered in the outer rim. What would once have been a grim military operation had transformed into something the humans called a server-wide event. Every species in the galaxy had representatives present, not because they were ordered to, but because nobody wanted to miss out on the achievement points. Current participant count stands at 47 trillion, Strategos announced, its avatar now sporting what it called a legendary skin, earned through some incomprehensible feat involving quantum mechanics and what humans called speedrun strats. Nice, Nova Chin commented, monitoring the tactical displays. That's got to be some kind of record for concurrent players. Actually, Mason Drake corrected, checking his data pad, we broke that record 6 times this month. Turns out galaxy-wide cooperative gameplay is pretty engaging. High Counselor Vexthor's crystalline form resonated with anticipation frequencies. Shall we begin the final encounter? The phrase would have been unthinkable a year ago. Now it was just another part of what humans had taught us to call raid terminology. Wait! Thompson called out. Everyone needs to check their achievements first. This is a one-time event, folks. Miss these achievements now, and they're gone forever. I watched in amazement as ancient, dignified species frantically reviewed their achievement lists like young students before an exam. The Silicon Collective was particularly anxious about completing their perfect clear run. Remember, Chen addressed the gathered forces, her voice carrying across countless communication channels, this isn't just about winning. It's about winning with style. And collecting all the rare drops, Thompson added. Don't forget, this boss has a 0.01% chance to drop the Essence of Evolution legendary item. Which the Science Council still hasn't figured out how to classify, I noted. That's what makes it legendary, Drake replied with a wink. The battle that followed would be studied for generations to come, though not for the reasons anyone might have expected a year ago. Yes, the last swarm hive mind was destroyed. Yes, galactic civilization achieved its greatest military victory. But what the historical records would focus on was how they did it. The Silicon Collective executed a perfect, frame-perfect quantum skip that their speedrunning community had discovered just days before. The Luminari demonstrated what they called a combo system that technically violated 3 laws of physics but looked, in Thompson's words, absolutely sick. The crystalline consciousness performed a maneuver that they insisted on calling a 360 no-scope crystal shatter cascade. And through it all, achievement notifications kept popping up across every display in the galaxy. Achievement unlocked, the end of an era. Achievement unlocked, perfect timeline. Achievement unlocked, style points matter. Achievement unlocked, breaking reality with friends. When the final blow was struck, by a joint team of 17 different species coordinating what they called a multiracial combo finisher, the galaxy erupted in celebrations that mixed thousands of different cultural traditions with human victory dances. GG, Thompson said, using the ancient human victory phrase that had somehow become a formal diplomatic term. GG, the council responded in unison, some species having to modify their vocal apparatus to pronounce it correctly. But it was what came next that truly showed how much the galaxy had changed. So, Chen said, pulling up a new display, who's ready for New Game Plus? The term caused immediate excitement across all channels. Strategos, particularly, seemed to vibrate with anticipation. We've got the swarm threat handled, Drake explained, but there's a whole galaxy out there. Ancient mysteries, unexplored dimensions, quantum puzzles that would make Einstein cry. And we've got trillions of players who just got really good at working together, Thompson added. Seems a shame to stop now. High Counselor Vexthor's crystalline form shimmered with what I now recognized as enthusiasm. You mean to turn galactic exploration and scientific discovery into the biggest, most ambitious multiplayer game ever created, Chen finished. With full cross-species support, dynamic event scaling, and achievement tracking for literally everything. Think about it, Drake continued, bringing up preliminary designs. Every scientific breakthrough is a raid boss. Every diplomatic challenge is a questline. Every mystery of the universe is a legendary drop waiting to happen. The council chamber erupted in discussions, but not in the old way of formal debates and careful protocols. Instead, species began forming what they called guilds, on the spot, organizing themselves into research teams, exploration parties, and what Thompson insisted on calling support classes. Professor Zalax, Strategos addressed me, its voice carrying new undertones of excitement. I believe I speak for all artificial intelligences when I say, count us in. We've already started designing the achievement trees. As I prepared to make my final entry in the Academy's records, I couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed. We had started with 3 human cadets who we thought would destroy our traditions. Instead, they had shown us that the universe was far more playful than we had ever imagined. The swarm, our greatest enemy, had been defeated not through grim determination or superior firepower, but because trillions of beings had decided that saving the galaxy looked fun. Ready to start the new campaign? Thompson asked, his grin now mirrored on faces, or equivalent structures, across countless species. New players joining every day, Chen reported, monitoring the galactic networks that had once been serious military channels and were now filled with terms like POG and based. And this time, Drake added, we've got tutorial modes for everything. I looked at my final report, then deleted it and wrote instead. Game status, victory achieved. Beginning new game plus. All species welcome. Difficulty level, reality itself. Current player count, still rising. Expected completion time, forever. Achievement hunters welcome. Professor, Thompson called out, interrupting my thoughts, you might want to see this. Someone just figured out how to sequence quantum states using dance moves, and the entire Silicon Collective is trying to learn something called breaking. As I watched a species made entirely of living crystal attempt to master human dance moves in zero gravity, I realized that perhaps this was what the galaxy had been waiting for all along. Not a serious, dignified march toward enlightenment, but a playful dance through the stars. Game on, universe. Game on.